Hello, I'm Will, this is Mike with the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
In this video we're looking at issue 22 of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Stormbringer magazine, which came with 2 paints, Averland Sunset and Gryph-Charger Grey. We'll be having a look through the issue as usual, how to use our new paints, and then at some more of the core rules, before in our battle report we'll be trying to slay the opposing general as the ceiling caves in around them. But having a look through the issue, first up we've got some more background on the Realm of Shadow. Ulgu is a realm of permanent darkness, as it says. There's no night and day, just various shades of gloom and mist. And it's a fairly treacherous place, the landscape constantly shifting, or at least appearing to be something that it isn't. Many travellers do just get lost, disappearing into the mists, never to be seen again, although it does have great natural wealth for those who are prepared to brave its dangers. That's not to say there are no inhabitants, though. There are various cities, including some cities of Sigmar, and those inhabited by various elves that worship the gods Malarian and Marathi, who, although technically allied to Sigmar, are not exactly what you might call the good guys. Those elves practicing various sort of bloody rituals and other things, as well as being generally fairly devious and backstabbing cultures. And to live in Ulgu at all requires a certain degree of deviousness. It also mentions here the Realm Stone of Ulgu, which is called Shadow Stone, which does hold great power for those who know how to harness its secrets. Now we have a bit about death in the mortal realms, and what happens to souls when they die. So in the past, in the Age of Myth, when there was relative peace in the realms, souls would go to their culture's afterlife in Shaiish, the realm of death, which was shaped by their beliefs, but generally speaking was a fairly peaceful experience. They just went to live among the rest of their kind. But that all changed with the Age of Chaos and then subsequently the rise of Nagash. Things became a bit more complicated. For a start, Sigmar started taking the best souls to forge his Stormcast Eternals out of, which angered Nagash, the self-appointed god of the dead, who claims dominion over all of the souls of the dead. He and his servants bind them into corpses and skeletons and zombies using various necromantic rituals, so the dead don't tend to rest under the dominion of Nagash. There's also the fate of those who pledge their souls to the Chaos gods. Nobody knows for sure what happens to them, but it's almost certainly fairly horrifying, as they tormented for eternity in one way or another. And it also says here that nobody actually really knows what happens to the souls of Oryx and Grots either, and certainly those species don't really think about it all that much. We have some background tables now where you can roll for things, starting with some Stormcast champion origins, so you can give some more background to your heroes, where they came from, what they did before they were Stormcast Eternals. Also some for soldiers, so perhaps a prime of the Praetorian Edicta units, and creatures as well, like the Gryph-hounds that accompanies the Lord Imperatant. And now some tables for the Cruel Boys as well. So here we've got the favourite plans of the bosses of the Cruel Boys, and of plans of their underlings, and even plans of the Grots, who have their own twisted schemes. Now we have the painting guide, and one of the 2 paints, Gryph-Charger Grey, that we got with this issue is a contrast paint, a new type of paint we haven't had before, which works in a similar way to a shade, but generally has a bit more pigment and flows slightly differently. So in this example here, there's a difference between a shade and a contrast paint. The shade paint on the left mostly flows into the recesses to add a lot of depth, and then lightly stains the upper surfaces, whereas the contrast paint tends to stain the surface more thicker colour, while also running into the recesses, but giving a smoother gradient from the recess to the higher points, and also tends to stain the lower surfaces a bit stronger. And some techniques you can use with both of these kind of paints, so obviously just applying shades in general, using shade paints, how much to put on your brush, and then different things you can do with it, like focused shading, so only shading in certain places to make a sort of colour gradient, or just a certain area. It mentions that shades tend to pool in the lower areas due to gravity, and just to, before it dries, you make sure you use a paintbrush to sop up any pools that gather. You can use it for recess shading, so just applying it into the recesses to create a darker colour without staining any of the upper surfaces, or shading all over. That works particularly well on highly textured surfaces. There's some advice about shading larger models, like this scenery piece that we'll be getting in a future issue. Since you need to hold on to part of the scenery piece to paint it, it makes sense to shade one half of it and then let that dry, so that you then have a dry bit to hold on to while you shade the other half. Otherwise you get finger marks all over it. And there's also some advice about tide marks that can form if you let it dry before you finish a whole surface. Just go over those with the base colour and then reshade it to get rid of those. That advice can apply for both shades and contrast paints. But now we'll be applying our new paints to our models. So Averland Sunset, just for a few areas, like some tassels on the Killer Boss and some of the Cruel Boys. And it also suggests painting the large crystals from the primal layer bright yellow. This is a base paint, so you will have to do a couple of coats, but it should cover reasonably well. Also for the beaks of the Gryph-Hound and the Gryph-Chargers, again a couple of coats there. And also had to use Gryph-Charger Grey as an all-over shade for Taros, the little bird that comes with the Truth Seekers, which takes the white colour and stains it bluish grey, but also, as you can see, it adds a lot of definition to the recesses. So just with one coat you get quite a lot of detail and texture on the model. But that's it for now, so I'll be handing you over to Mike now, where we'll be looking at some new rules and getting into our game.
So as usual, before we can get into today's game, we have to look at our new rules, and we're expanding on the core rules once again. Most of this is things we've seen before, so we've seen the keywords before, what an army is and so on. A few new things like unit coherency. We've heard about coherency before. We actually clarify what happens when a unit becomes out of coherency, in which case at the end of a turn, if a unit is out of coherency, you must remove models until it is back in coherency. And just remember that units with more than 5 models have to have the models have to stay within an inch of 2 of their friends rather than just 1, as you can see in that picture down the bottom. A few other things to note are things like your general, where at the start of a game you pick one of your models to be your general. It will usually be a hero, and they will generate command points, which we'll learn about in a later game. And again, over the next 2 pages, most of these things we've seen before. On the left-hand side, it's going over the equipment you need to play the game, so dice and the tape measure, and what various types of dice rolls are, clarifying things that you can only re-roll a dice once, must accept the result of the second roll, what constitutes a modifier, or what unmodified means. It also clarifies that you cannot adjust a hit or wound roll by more than +1 or -1. And on the right hand side it goes over various abilities, again things we should be used to by now. Important thing to note is that if 2 abilities would happen at the same time, then the player whose turn it is, their abilities apply first. If 2 abilities have contradictory effects, then the one that applies last is the one that takes precedence. And then the last page is going over the battlefield and deployment, what counts as a reserve unit or a summoned unit, because there is a distinction there. So a reserve unit is something you set up in reserve, a bit like when you would have a Stormcast unit held back to use Silence of the Storm on. It would be a reserve unit, whereas summoned units are units that are added to your army during a game. So for example, the demon armies can summon their fellows during the game. So we can get into today's game. In the background here, the game is taking place in the various winding tunnels of Ulgu. Both factions are trying to map out their extent, and hopefully with that knowledge to gain control of this realm gate between Gur and Ulgu. And so you can see our alliance objectives here, the Stormcast, which consists of the Lord Imperator, the Knight Arcanum and the Stormstrike Chariot. A bit bafflingly, brought a chariot into the winding tunnels. They're trying to map it to find a safe route between Gur and Ulgu, whereas the Forces of Destruction, consisting of the Killer Boss, the Swamp Collar Shaman and their 2 Grots, and the 3 Bolt Boys, are hoping to colonise and inherit these tunnels as a perfect sneaky hiding place. So you can see our battle mat there, using our Realm of Shadows mat, 2 deployment zones. So the bottom left corner is the Order deployment around the dead spider, while the bottom right corner is the Destruction deployment zone. We'll be rolling off, and the player who wins the roll-off deploys a unit first, and whoever finishes deploying their models first chooses a piece of the Primal Lair Streamer piece and puts it on the battlefield using the sort of regular trade placing rules. So our victory conditions are a bit different from usual. We have to pick one of our heroes to be our general, and then at the end of a battle round, the opponent's general has been slain, then you win the game. Although there is a condition that might cause it to be a draw. If both generals are slain at the end of the same battle round, then the battle ends in a draw instead. And that little quirk here is the collapsing ceiling, so these caverns are actually falling in as we're trying to map them. Don't think this is a terribly safe place for either party, to be honest. What this means is at the end of each battle round, each player rolls a dice for each of their units on the battlefield, and if the result of the roll is less than or equal to the current battle round, then that unit takes a mortal wound. Though it is obviously entirely possible that you could slay the opposing general and then have your own general die to a rock on the head. Anyway, we'll get the board set up and get straight into it. Now here we are with our 2 little scouting forces, and you can see we've got the scenery arrayed fairly randomly. Going over my deployment, so I've got the Killer Boss slightly out in front. Morlek, he's going to be my general. If it really comes down to it, he can always push Knee-Biter in the way of something and survive a little bit longer. And I've got Golmrog, the Great, and Stugit just behind him, and then Kargash's Vipers, the Bolt Boys, just to his left. And then the Stormcast deployment.
So we've got the Knight Arcanum Borea Starfang on the left as you see it. My general will be Helio Hammerfist, the Lord Imperator. He's in the middle with the Dauntless, the Gryph-Hound, and then the Chariot is on the right flank.
And then we're rolling off full priority in the first turn. It's a draw, so the Stormcast finished deploying first, so you win.
Okay, well in that case I'm going to make the Crawl Boys go first, because I don't think Arcane Bolt's in range.
And also my dirty trick, I think I'm just going to choose Noisy Racket, because there's no cover near the Bolt Boys for covered in mud to be useful. So we'll be into Crawl Boys turn 1. Well, and the first In the hero phase, Golmrog's going to give a poison to the Bolt Boys, because it will help them with their crossbow bolts, and then he's going to try and cast Summon Boggy Mist, which has a cost value of 7. So he failed. My movement phase, Golmrog and Morlock have just stepped back a little bit, hopefully made the chariots charge a little bit harder, and then the Bolt Boys are just in range of the Lord Imperator, so they'll shoot at him. So 4 shots from the Bolt Boys, hitting on 2s, 5 pluses do mortal wounds instead. 4 mortal wounds and a hit. This wounds on 3, it does. Ren -1.
He saves that, but still takes 4 mortal wounds down to 4.
There's actually 3 wounds left on the Lord Imperator. But that's it for my turn, on to Stormcast turn 1.
Well, we'll start by casting Mystic Shield from the Knight Arcanum. Well, gets it with a 10.
Try and bind. Oh, I did with an 11.
Oh, never mind then. And then in my movement phase, the chariot has gone its normal movement distance, so it can still shoot. Both of my heroes ran. The Lord Imperator is clearly very angry because he got a 6 and charged out front of the Knight Arcanum, just following behind. Lord Imperator can't shoot because he ran, but the chariot can shoot at the Bolt Boys, so they can cut down the amount of fire coming at us. 2 shots on 3s, they both hit. They're winning on 4s though, because the dirty trick makes us -1 to wound. No one didn't win anyway.
Yeah. Well, and that's it for the bat round. Now we need to roll off for the collapsing ceiling. I'll do all of my units first. So on a 1, the units take mortal wounds. So Golmrog, nope. Morlek, Killer Boss, nope. And the Bolt Boys, nope. They're all okay.
And then, well, I'll start with my general on 1. No, he's fine. Breyer Starfang, not a cannon. It's fine. And the chariot is fine.
And then priority for battle round 2.
Well, I've won, and I think we'll go first before my general gets shot.
Yep, so Stormcast turn 2.
Hero phase, I'll try and cast Blaze of the Heavens, because it will be in range. Needing a 6 or 7 now. We're going to have to go for it, because the Lord Imperator might not last all that much longer. So the chariot has gone up to about 3 inches away, and the Lord Imperator moved normally, the Knight Arcanum ran. On to the shooting phase, we're going to shoot the chariot at the Bolt Boys to start with. 3s, no, they both missed. Well, we'll do the Lord Imperator's staff next. It gets 4 shots at the same target. And 3s, 3 hits. Winning on 3s now. Oh, only 1.
Yeah, no save because I've only got a 6+, so 1 guy takes a wound.
On to the charge phase, we'll start with the Lord Imperator. He's not in with a 4, and then the chariot only needs a 3, and it gets a 5. So the chariot will finish there, and then we get its ADR Unleashed ability. I'm going to put that on the Killer Boss. 5, so 5 dice, 4s do mortal wounds. 3 mortal wounds.
You'll take that, I guess. So he's down to 3.
And then attacks with the axe first, getting 1 hit, wounds on 3, and that's a wound.
-1, so 4+, yeah, he's got 3+ save, that's fine.
And the Gryph-Chargers, getting only 3 hits, out of 6, wounding on 3s, 2 wounds. I think these are in -2.
Yep, so these will be 5s. Fail both. So Morlek is down to 1 wound, but if he's about to get killed by a falling rock, at least he's still got an E-biter to push in the way. And I get all my hitbacks. So there's all my hitbacks. Some models have to pile in, but I won't bother showing it until the end. So we've got 6 attacks from the Bolt Boys on 4s, but 5 pluses do mortal wounds instead. So there's 1 hit and a mortal wound on the chariot. Wounds on a 4, it does.
3+ save, yes.
Morlek has 4 attacks with his Boss Hacker on 3s, 6s do mortal wounds instead. So there's 2 mortal wounds and 3 hits. And he's wound on 3s, getting 1. -1 rend.
With a 4, failed, so down to 7.
Yeah. 3 attacks from Kneebiter on 4s. Kneebiter gets a hit, which wounds.
3+, oh no.
Down to 6. Then Golmrog, 2 attacks with his staff on 3s, 6s do mortal wounds instead. 1 hit with a staff, that does not wound. And Stugit gets a hit, that does not wound.
So it's down to 6.
But that's going to be it for Stormcast's turn, on to the Crawl Boys' turn. Golmrog's going to start by trying to cast Arcane Bolt. Gets it with a 5.
Try and bind, yes, with 12.
So the Bolt Boys are in melee, so they have to use their hasty shot profile. So this is 7 shots, hitting on 4s. 6s do mortal wounds because they're engaged and the shaman's engaged, so you can't hand out a poison. So hitting on 4s, 6s do mortal wounds instead. There's 2 mortal wounds and 2 hits. These wound on 3s, hitting 1, with -1.
Oh, takes another 2 wounds, it's down to 2.
Then we're straight to the combat phase, where I'm going to do Morlek first, see if we can finish off the chariot. 4 attacks on 3, 6 do mortal wounds. Only 2 hits. Wound on 3s. Oh no!
Oh.
Come on! Come on, knee biter. 2 mortal wounds. Chariot killer. That's his new name. So knee biter, hero of the day, kills a Stormstrike chariot. It's the end of the battle round, so we need to see if anyone gets hit by falling rocks. So now it's a 1 or a 2. So Morlek, the important one, he's fine. Golmrog, no, he's fine. And the Bolt Boys, they're fine.
I've got Hilo Hammerfist, he's fine, and Brea Starfang. Nope, everyone's good at dodging rocks.
And now we're back to priority.
Oh, I have one, I better go first.
So Stormcast turn 3.
We'll try and cast Mystic Shield, because hopefully we'll be able to get in and beat up the general, but then Mystic Shield might be needed to survive the return attacks. We get it with a 10.
Try and bind. Nope.
So we'll put that on the Hammerfist. And then we'll move up there, and then in the shooting phase, Hilo Hammerfist uses his staff on Morlek. D6 shots, 2. 3s. Oh, they both miss.
Ooh, it's going to be a photo finish.
Well, he'll have to charge. He succeeds just. Well, he'll go there, and then we'll do the Knight Arcanum as well. She's in with the net. Well, the Lord Imperator will go first. He'll put all his attacks on Morlek. 4 attacks himself. Oh, they all hit.
Yeah, he's mad.
3s. Oh, only 2 wounds. -1.
Yeah. So 4 pluses. No, he's definitely dead. Even with knee biter being pushed in the way, that's not going to help. So Morlek is slain, but I can still claw out a draw if I manage to kill the Lord Imperator. So I'm going to do Golmrog, and he's going to attack the Lord Imperator. So Golmrog's got 2 attacks with his stick, hitting on 3s, 6s do mortal wounds instead. Well, he got 2 hits, wounding on 3s, 2 wounds.
2 4 pluses. Oh, failed 1.
3 pluses because he got Mystic Shield.
Oh yeah.
But D3 damage. 2.
Down to 1.
And Stugit. Can we have 2 hero grops in one game? Yes, we can. That's a mortal wound and a hit. So the chariot was brought low by knee biter, and Hilo Hammerfist is brought low by Stugit. So that doesn't mean this game will end in a draw, but we might as well play out until one side is wiped out just to see what happens.
Well, Brea Starfang will attack the Bolt Boys because they're a bit more dangerous, probably. She hits twice. Only wounds on 4s though. Oh, 1 wound.
Yep, 6 plus save.
So just D3 damage. No, 3. Well, I killed 2 of them anyway.
So just Kargash left. Gets to fight back before he potentially runs away. 2 attacks on 4, 6 to do mortal wounds. We got a mortal wound on Brea Starfang.
She's down to 5.
And then Kargash's Burst Rock test. He's bravery 5, and he lost 2 of his friends, so he runs away. Well, and that's the end of Stormcast turn 3, and we're on to Crawlboy's turn 3. So Golmrog's going to try and cast Arcane Bolt, and fail. So he's going to have to use his stick instead. So I have to pile in to get Stugit in range, obviously the deadliest of the 2. 2 attacks from Golmrog's staff on 3 60 mortal wounds. He got 2 hits again, and no wounds. Down to Stugit, who gets a hit, and wounds.
Oh, no, saved. And 3 attacks back. Hitting all 3 times. Wounding on 4s. Oh, 2. Oh.
So 6s. No.
Oh, 2d3 damage. 5.
Down to 1. But that is actually the end of the battle round, so we'll be rolling off for falling rocks on a 3 or less. Oh, Golmrog gets brained by a rock.
Does Brea Starfang take one on the way out? No, she's fine.
So Golmrog concussed by falling rocks. Brea Starfang lives, but unfortunately since Morlek and Hilo Hammerfist are both slain, this game will be a draw. So I'll recap that for you now. Well, that was the game for issue 22 of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Stormbringer magazine. How did you think that went?
Well, I mean, it was kind of comical, really. I probably made a mistake in making you go first because I sort of forgot about the 4 shots dealing 2 mortal wounds on 5 pluses. Could have just lost the game basically instantly there, but sort of got away with it, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd say both the armies are weird because they're just so small, 2 heroes and another unit. But the fact they give me a unit that can potentially kill one of your units with a good roll in one turn, and the chariot, I thought these are narrow winding tunnels. No, just fit a chariot in. Obviously the kind of thing you want in winding tunnels.
Yes, and then we had the falling rocks rule, which didn't it in for Goldenrod at the end, and it was all very bizarre.
It's not surprising that it ended up with a draw, to be honest.
No, I mean, if you hadn't done those 4 mortal wounds right at the start, then he probably would have lived, but there's nothing you can do to defend yourself against an angry grot with a ladle, or a poisoned ladle, apparently.
Or another one with a shiv, a which the
chariot. Yes, chariot should beware of small greenskins with poison knives.
I mean, to be honest, I think if I had gotten priority in battle round 2 or 3, I think I would have won pretty easily at that point.
Yeah, the shooting is actually quite dangerous when you're actually just focusing on one target.
Yeah, only having to kill one, and then probably could have just moved Morlek behind all my models. Very odd scenario, really.
Yes. I mean, it did occur to me I could have just run the Lord Imperator away and let the chariot and the Lord Knight Arcanum deal with everything, but that wouldn't have been interesting. It might not have even worked anyway, because it needed him to come in and finish off Morlek anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, just the fact that the Cruel Boys have a unit that doesn't want to move, but it has potential for a lot of damage, even with hasty shot. If you give them a poison, 7 shots with 5 pluses doing mortal wounds, it's probably get at least 2 on average.
I wouldn't. If you hadn't done all that damage in the first shooting, then I probably would have been a little bit more cautious. Rather than charging in the chariot in turn 2, I would have probably tried to wait for my other heroes to catch up. But then again, I suppose I still can't waste time because the shooting can still do that.
Well, and also the chariot is such a powerful unit. There's a good chance it could actually just run over my general as well if you get into range of him. Yeah, well, that's probably a mistake on my part putting him in the front, but he's also my best fighter. Yeah,
I had rolled a 5 for my charge roll, but I could easily have rolled, say, a 10 and done 5 or 6 mortal wounds just on the charge, and that would be the end of the game. Sort of rather a lot of potential for swing, I think we should say.
Yeah, well, it was a fun game to play at the very least.
Yes, it was quite amusing, and especially with the antics of the grots.
Yeah, knee biter chariot killer.
Yes.
He's got himself a title.
Yes, we're to record that in the battle record, perhaps.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's too much more to say about the game. More expansion on the core rules. Again, it's mostly clarifications. None of them really would have really come up. I don't think we have any abilities that would have happened at the same time. No need for cohesion. It's the Bolt Boys, technically.
The thing about having to remove models that aren't in coherency at the end has come up before we knew about the rules, so we don't now know that at least.
Yeah,
so,
I think there was, again, 1 or 2 issues ago, some Praetors ended up out of coherency. Technically, one of them had to be removed then.
Yes, it does. And it is one of those things where you have to be careful which model you assign wounds to, because you could end up in a situation where you do that even with just a careless move, really. If the wounded model ends up being the one that would be breaking coherency, then you could be in trouble. Yeah. Especially because if it's in your opponent's turn, there's nothing you can do about it. It also means it is a good strategy, though, to try and lock down enemy units so they can't pile in too much, either by surrounding models or just making sure that they're not the closest unit and things like that, so that they can't pile in the direction you want them to if you know your enemy has a particular model that's taking damage. Or even there are a few occasional abilities where you can actually pick an enemy model to take damage, and so you can sometimes pick a model or cause them problems in that regard as well.
Yeah, like the Snatcher Crew ability from the Sloroth and the Cunning Crew. That can cause coherency shenanigans. And we got 2 new paints, Averland Sunset, the base paint, just basically used the same way as we had before. Might need more coats than other base paints because yellow often doesn't cover that well. We got Gryph-Charger Grey, which is a contrast paint. Magazine tells you to use it like a shade paint, even though they work slightly differently.
Yes, and this is the first Partworks magazine that's been supplied with a contrast paint. I mean, to be fair, I think the first 2 that came out, they didn't exist at the time, but it is interesting to see that they would include them, because they are a good resource for less experienced painters, or also if you're not really that much of a fan of painting and you just want to get armies painted up quickly. Contrast paints are great for that.
I think I'd paint an entire army using only contrast paints. I might have a go at it, but say the Cruel Boys, all the red, the banner and the shield on Morlek, you can see there, and the shields on the Gut Rippers are all contrast, and all their flesh is contrast as well as the yellow crystals on the terrain. I think Morlek's Stugit's weird mixture, I think, was contrast as well. So it's a fairly quick way to paint things to a decent standard, but you probably would get better results using the regular method if you took the time.
Yeah, it depends what you want to get out of your painting as well. If you just want things to look good for a tabletop standard, then contrast paints are perfectly good. They're also quite a useful tool for more experienced painters as well. You can achieve some cool effects with them. Maybe they'll cover some of those a bit later on in the magazine, I'm not sure.
But otherwise, I don't think there's too much more to say about this game or this issue. So as always, if you like this content, do leave a like and subscribe. Let us know how you've been getting on with Stormbringer if you've been collecting it. We've been the Total Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.